Hello, my name's Amanda Foxon-Hill and this is Suddenly Autistic. Have you ever had a sound bath? Do you know what one is? I didn't and I hadn't until this weekend when, as part of a drumming workshop that I took part in, the first exercise we did was to participate in a sound bath exercise or a class for about an hour. I suppose instead of a class it was more like a meditation. That's how it was, that's how it ran. I had not really come across sound baths before. I've had a couple of friends who have participated, but it wasn't something that I knew much about until I actually did it. This video is about my experience of the sound bath and then how I processed that experience afterwards and up to today, and that will include my own personal I suppose nuances and my experience of it, potentially some of the things that I experienced and how that fits with being autistic. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Thank you for joining me. So the sound bath, how this played out is the class sat or lay down on yoga mats in a semicircle around an altar, I suppose you could call it, or a sort of arrangement of singing bowls, I think they're called, and other instruments or music making equipment, I guess you could say. There was a lead facilitator who was talking us through the meditation and a co-facilitator who was participating in creating some of the music. The session went for about an hour, and as I said, this wasn't something I was really prepared for or knew much about, so I lay back and gave it a go. This particular sound bath had a combination of sounds, from sort of like a musical beat, the kind of thing that you might expect when you go into a treatment at I was going to say a therapy centre, but it's not really like that, like a day spa. So that kind of day spa music, that mood music, the relaxing music, and then there'd be other sounds come in. Some of them pleasant, I guess you'd say, and some of them less so from my perspective. But I gather, since looking at it afterwards, that these sounds are quite specific, and they're put together in a way that will bring things out of you, you know, that will help you heal and learn and grow and get into your creativity or relaxation or whatever it is. So the whole idea of sound baths is like any other therapy. It's a therapeutic session, but you don't talk, you just listen, and you're laying there having a guided meditation or just listening to the music, and the music is chosen to stimulate the brain in certain ways or to evoke a response in a certain way. So that's what happened, and like I said, it went for about an hour. And it became apparent to me quite early on in the session that it was making me feel very sick. So during the meditation, I did see a couple of sort of visions, you know, sort of hallucinations, I guess you'd call them. I don't know what you'd call them, or pictures, images flash into my mind, and colours and whatever. After which, but that sort of happened fairly quickly. Nothing scary, nothing too weird. I felt comfortable enough with the psychological aspect of what was going on, and I kind of settled myself down, feeling like I was on a raft, actually, in the film The Life of Pi. If you've ever seen that, that would probably be the feeling that I had, that I was bobbing around on an ocean in the middle of the night. It was dark in the room, fairly dark. There was these sounds, and it felt to me like that. Now, the motion that I felt was coming purely from the music, and that's where I found it was very interesting, because I was actually getting motion sick, or I was experiencing motion sickness through the sound bath, the sound therapy. I knew that I was laying down still in a room that wasn't moving any more than rooms normally move, which is very little. so this was purely an effect of the sound, which I found very interesting, if not a little disconcerting. There were a number of times during the hour session where I actually thought I was going to vomit and I needed to leave, but I was reluctant to do that. And I had, I'd had a chat to the facilitator had a chat to me beforehand, knowing my history, etc., and made sure that I knew it was okay to leave if I wanted to. But I didn't want to, more because, I didn't want to feel sick, but I wanted to know how this was going to go. I wanted to go through the whole process and see if things got better or worse, and whether I could discern what was causing the problem, if there was to be a problem, which there was, and what was making me feel good. So I was trying to participate and analyse myself at the same time, which probably isn't the best way to have a therapy session or a relaxing session, but I didn't feel... I better backtrack. For me, when I'm trying something new like this, the first session isn't really something that's going to achieve like a relaxation or whatever. Usually it could do, but it's not my key objective. My key objective when taking part in something new like this is to get to know how it goes. So, for example, the same thing happened when I had a flotation tank experience, or with general therapy. It's really just let me get my nervous system and my body into this zone, know what to expect, and then next time I can leave the intellectualizing at the door and just enjoy it. Probably won't be doing that though with sound therapy. I'm not sure that it's for me. So, how did I feel in it? As I said, it made me feel quite sick. I didn't feel the same across the board. There were different notes, different instruments, different pitches, and bits and rhythms going on. Some felt very vibrational. They felt like out of balance wobbles in my head, and I think that's what was causing the nausea. Others, didn't really feel like much. There were some parts of the class that were like tinkly, like I suppose fairy bells and like those little tinkle twinkle type of sounds, and there were some deeper sounds like thunder roaring and some drumming sounds, which I actually felt, I was quite happy with the drumming sounds. They felt quite nice. But there was this little section, like I said, which actually was a fairly substantial section that made me feel physically sick. So that was sound therapy, or the sound bath. We were told before the class that it could make some people feel nauseous, some people feel anxious. It can even bring on seizures in certain conditions. So there is you have to go through a Q&A and have a chat to the therapist before to make sure it's for you. So I didn't have anything terrible happen other than the fact that I felt sick, and actually that sickness did persist for quite a long time. In fact, most of the day, and almost all of the rest of that day, I also was extremely tired. So it was a really tiring experience for me, which perhaps wasn't the best way to start a 2-day workshop, but we managed, and it was interesting. So that was sound bath. In terms of how did it go for other people, so that I was in a class with other people, we all shared our experiences afterwards, and I won't repeat what people said because that's in confidence, but the general gist of it was that it was enjoyable. Some people it was deeply connecting and lovely. Other people it was it was nice, it was different, it might have brought up some images in their mind, some good, some bad, some a little bit weird, but generally it did what it said on the tin. It evoked some responses that people could work with, more visionary than physical. I think, although I might be wrong because not everybody shared everything, but I think that I was the only person in that class to share that the experience had made me feel physically sick. And when I said made me feel, like I said, I actually felt like I was going to be sick. It was that strong an emotion, sickness. So that brings me on to the next part, which was why. Why is it that when you're lying still in a fairly still room, as still as a room can be, can you feel seasick from sound? How does that even happen? And that brings me on to me being autistic and me being me. Now, the reason that sound in general can make people feel nauseous physically nauseous is because of the way that sound is processed. So we have our ears on the side of our head, and we're very good as humans as detecting where a sound is coming from. So we have this bi-directional hearing as opposed to ears on the front or ears at the back, or spiders have ears on their legs, hairy legs, which is, they don't have ears on their leg, they hear through the hairs on their legs. But humans have these ears. So we're good at that kind of thing. I've lost my thread now. So so what happens to us is when we hear a sound, it goes into our ears and tells us something about the direction it's going in once our brain has got involved. So the sound comes in as sound vibrations. So the vibrations are movement. The movement's picked up by the hairs in our ears, and and that vibration is then taken into the ear, where it gets processed by our vestibular system. Now, being autistic and being me, my vestibular system is a little bit off, a little bit quirky. Being autistic, having problems with your sensory processing is very common. In fact, I have a feeling it is one of the core diagnostic criteria of being autistic, and I certainly tick that box, although I haven't really unpicked it to the nth degree as to why and where that's coming from for me. But this sound therapy definitely made it clear that I have problems, I have differences and nuances around my hearing, and that my hearing around my vestibular system, which then goes on to make me feel dizzy. So this vestibular system, which is taking the information from the actual sound waves and then turning it into a message, like helping the brain decode the message, for some reason my vestibular system and then my brain, and coming out again, was interpreting certain vibrations as movement and making me feel seasick. And that is not unique to me. That's something that other people can feel, but it's not normal as such. One of the other things that I noticed, and I only noticed this when I came home and did more research, found some pure binaural tones from different wavelengths on the internet, and then tested myself, noted everything down, and then tested my husband and noted his response. Granted, this is only a science project of 2, it's not valid really, but I thought this was happening during the class. I could hear the two sounds all the time. I could hear, there was no merger of the sound. And this also happened to me when I looked up these pure binaural beats on YouTube, so like the alpha, beta, delta waves. I could always hear the two, and sometimes the two I could hear the out of syncness, and they would wobble. It would be wobbly and it would remain wobbly. The wobbly wouldn't go away. I wouldn't get a one pure note in the middle. Sometimes I would even feel like there was 3 notes, like there was this one, that one, and the next one. So there was definitely something going on that was outside of this expected thing that's supposed to happen. This frequency discrimination threshold where the 2 beats become 1, the fusion range, seemed to be a little bit off for me, and maybe that was what was making me feel sick. Now, I don't know why that's happening. I'm not an audiologist after doing 1 sound bath, but I feel like that's happening. Now, the vestibular system in general is really important for balance and for us to understand as individuals where we are in space. I was going to say in time, but that's probably a bit different. But where our bodies are. My vestibular system shows up as quirky in my clumsiness. Like, I'm very clumsy. I can drop things. I knock into things. I find it hard to walk through narrow spaces and doorways. So I knew that I had some slight issues with my vestibular system. Basically, what the sound bath has done is highlighted that, yeah, that's true, and look how strange this is. It even makes you feel like you're moving when you're not. So that's part of my why. But the vestibular issues are only one part of what can, I suppose, be a bit of an issue with sound and with people who are experiencing all of these things a little bit differently. I'm just trying to find... Sound sensitivity, which I do have, can come in different forms. There is... you can be sensitive to sound because of a recruitment issue. Recruitment issues are to do with hearing loss, and I have to admit I tick that box too. So I have a particular type of hearing loss called cookie bite hearing loss. So this is rather unusual and not typically linked to aging or the kind of damage we do when we listen to high music or something like that. My type of hearing loss is more likely to be genetic, and it's a very uneven profile. So I've got some frequencies that I can hear perfectly, some that I can actually hear almost better than perfectly, and then others where I've got a bit of a dead spot. So it's really, they say cookie bite because that's what it looks like. It's a very jagged profile. Now, my hearing loss is in the sort of mild to moderate. There's a couple of them in the moderate, and it's frequency dependent. So at some frequencies I'm really good, at some frequencies I'm not as good. And that can cause me problems with hearing words and processing information through my ears. So there's no doubt for me that going into sound therapy, and I didn't think of this before because I hadn't really prepared for the sound therapy. Going into sound therapy with cookie bite hearing, I'm definitely going to hear things differently to the average person because this is kind of a rare type of hearing loss. So it's not just the volume that's different for me. In fact, it's not the volume that's different for me, which you might get if someone's just getting a little bit deaf with age or with damage. Mine is the quality of hearing. So I'm hearing some things perfectly and some things not well. So it's this untuned piano thing, which in itself is confusing to the brain. So that's a recruitment issue. Then there's other things. There's this thing called hyperacusis, which is tolerance, which is where your tolerance to sound collapses over time, and that can be linked to various different things. So it's just, certain sounds become irritating over time. It could have a psychological bias. It could have some damage from another part of the body or a way of processing, but there's that. Then there's hyperacute, which is a sensitivity or particular sensitivity to some frequencies that comes from birth. It's possible that I have this hyperacute sensitivity due to the cookie bite hearing profile, where some frequencies I'm almost better than average, or I'm almost hypersonic hearing. Well, not really, but you know what I mean, or hyperacute, and then others which I'm low. So I might have that, but I don't know. I'm not an audiologist, but that is something that can happen, and it's the kind of thing that would send somebody, putting their hands over the ears and running out of a place if that sort of frequency or intensity hit them. And then the last one is the misophonia or misophonia, which is a dislike of a set of sounds, such as things like chewing or whatever. And this isn't to do with volume, this is just the actual type of sound. And I think I also can maybe have this as well, because there are some sounds like the washing machine ding, the ding that tells you you've not got your seatbelt on in the car, the phone ringing, that really set me on edge. And again, some of these might be to do with the tone and the resonance of it, or the duration of it, or something that just gets on my nerves and just makes me feel actually physically sick. Or it could be psychological, could be anything. So that was my experience of the sound bath. Would I do it again? I don't think I'd do a group session again, because I think from looking at me, and I what I am going to do is go to an audiologist. I'm going to find a specialist audiologist if I can, to just get a proper profile, because these things are tiring. It's the net result of the sound bath was feeling like I was going to vomit, which is bad enough, but then feeling extremely tired for about 2 days afterwards, which is terrible when you've got to work. So it's a physical reaction. But I don't think I'd do a sound bath class as a general class, because I think that I have such nuanced reaction. I have such an individualized reaction to sound that I would need it to be personal. And so I can see how sound baths might be beneficial and relaxing and part of your whole, well-being. I do use music and sound to help me. I do put on relaxation tracks. I do drum along to things. I do find that sort of brain frisson reaction, whatever it is, to things that I like. So there's definitely something there. I agree that sound is therapeutic, and it does move you, connect you, make you feel more alive. But for me, I think for a sound bath, as a therapeutic intervention or strategy, I'd need it to be one-on-one, and that's definitely something that therapists can provide. But I'm glad I did the class. I'm glad that I just did it sort of almost blind, didn't really know that I was even going to do it. It just sort of happened to be part of the workshop that I was taking part of on the weekend. I'm not glad that it made me feel sick, but the feeling sick did lead me to do a bit more digging around my own hearing, and my hearing, the cookie bite, etc., is something that I've been wanting to get back and address, because finding out I was autistic at a later age, as in like 40s as opposed to as a kid, one of my worries was that is now that I might have already done some damage, or things would be quite difficult to put right and correct. Now, with this audio, my hearing problems and my sensory profile, I think I'm really keen to know as much as I can about that now, while I still have my capacity, because you can't take anything for granted. And the way that my brain gets worn out, I'd hate to lose brain power through any illness or incident and then be put into a position where environmental things were going on that were actually doing my head in, basically. So I guess like a lot of people, I won't normalize it. I guess for me, I am a bit worried about wearing my brain out, about getting dementia or something like that, and then not that worries me as much as then being put in a position where I'm listening to things that are actually making me feel sick and have physical symptoms. So I feel the more I can do now, the better. And in general, if this helps other people, then that's great to share. But so that's my experience with the sound bath. Overall, there's a bit of science in it. I think probably it's a little bit over-egged. I did want to say, usually with the sound bath, the go-to, if you're a person that goes along and you didn't really share much history, and you have a bad reaction, you have a physical reaction or something, the general explanation for that the internet will give is that you're purging something. There's something in you, you're releasing some feelings or whatever, and that's part of your therapeutic journey. So it's a good thing. It's putting a positive spin on having a bad reaction. I would say that in light of, I can see how that could be something, like a sound could trigger a thought that you'd suppressed, and that might not make you feel good, but inevitably it would lead you on a healing journey. But I also think that we need to leave room for people like myself, and I'm not that unique in terms of having a different to the norm hearing profile and sensory profile. That sometimes these reactions are nothing to do with purging and getting out, hidden feelings. It's literally a physical reaction. It's to do with your biology and the infrastructure you've got to play with. And I wouldn't want anyone to feel shamed or uncomfortable about that. I think the best way to deal with that is to get to know your own body, because for me, there's no way, like my ears are not going to get better. Hopefully they won't get worse, but they're not going to get better. They are what they are, so I've got to protect them, and it's about protecting myself. So that's what I wanted to say. Hopefully that was interesting and not too boring, but see you again soon.